on their way and looking to a long-term clinical academic career, and particularly building careers for those professions where there has not been a huge academic presence. So they're really, really important fellowships, and you've already heard about those this morning. I wasn't able to come along earlier. So what would be really helpful for me would be to get a sense of what things people feel they still want to know in this session. So you might want to put it in the chat, or you might want to sort of just ask a question, and then we can kind of make sure we cover all those. And then also I hope I can call a bit on Wendy and Jörg, who've also sat in on a wider range of panels than I have, and Gary, to get a sense of that. And so I've been invited as an academic panel member, but actually what I would also be keen is to understand from Gary how the PPI element works on panels, because I think that is kind of not obvious from the way that the application is put together, but that is really important in terms of getting through both the written application and the interview. And I can talk a bit about through the sort of the whole process from a panel member perspective. But can I just have some sort of thoughts on what people want to get out of this session?
For me, Jackie, I mean, I've never sat on a panel.
Have you not?
So I would just be, you know, people have other views perhaps, but I would just be interested, what goes on a panel, and how does it work?
Okay. Okay, that's okay. Any other sort of thoughts for what we absolutely definitely?
I think it would be great to hear what the panels sort of, what they actually think, what they actually look at, like what are the most important things, and are there any sort of things that if you put them in your application, they'd be just they're a definite no, that you just think no, that's not, in terms of every part of it. That'd be great.
Great. Any other thought, particularly from people who might be applying, actually, because this is for you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, I was just wondering whether it might be useful for those in the room to hear about the difference between the reviewers and their role, and the panel and its processes and elaborations, because to make, you know, convey some of these issues around speaking both to specialists and to generalists, as often on the panels there are no specialists directly relevant to the bid.
Yeah, okay, that's really helpful, thank you.
And Ellen has said about, please, would like to know, or people like to know about the process, who assesses the paper application, and then what the interviews are like. That would be quite useful to know what the interviews are like from the panel point of view, and what the interviewees can expect.
Great, okay. So these are all things, thankfully, I think I can answer, which is good. So what I think I might do, so anything else you want to add, put it in the chat, and Wendy will keep me in line and make sure I respond to those. But also, so I'm going to start by talking about the process from when you apply. So you've got, the panels are quite big. So when we actually meet, they actually meet in 2 rooms. So you kind of, when it said that, they will have different people in them, a different chair, slightly different dynamic. But at the beginning, the first thing that happens is your application goes to the office, NIHR office, whichever office it is, and they will decide whether it's eligible. So things like, are you in the right group of professionals? Are you, do you meet the criteria for being able to apply for this? And a very small number of people will fall out at that stage because they haven't read those instructions, and that is just a terrible thing to happen, because it's just waste of your time. But the vast majority will go out to the panel members. So as a panel member, what they tell you have to do: complete Nolan principles, no conflict of interest, declare it if you've got any connection to this person. That means supervise their PhD unless it was an extremely long time ago. Do you work with anyone in their group? Do you so you have to make sure that you're not connected to that person. And so the office will do quite a lot of that work, and they will allocate usually two reviewers, two panel members, to look at the draft of your application, look at your application, and they will read it, and they're very much told to read it as generalists. They say, well, if this is your area, don't read it like an expert in the area, read it like you're a panel member, and you're meant to be thinking, is this a good fellowship application? And it sounds like quite implausible that people can look at them in areas that are a long way off. Why would they want me, a public health doctor, sexual health doctor, looking at applications from occupational therapists or paramedics or whatever? But actually, I mean, what is quite surprising is there really is a consensus on what is a good application. And if you were going to the Wellcome Trust, they would have different set of criteria for different sorts of panels. But what NIHR want is something that looks like something that that person could do on their own, without needing a whole team, in the period of time, that would deliver something useful for the health service, very broadly conceived. So it's got to be, so I think that the biggest reason, so there are two, so I would say at that point, so the two major reasons why people get thrown out and don't go to interview is that they don't have, either personally or within the team, the expertise to do what they want to do. That is quite important. So for example, if you're going to do a whole load of qualitative research and you come from a quantitative background, then, well, hang on, where's your training elements that will make sure you're ready to do this in year 2 when it wants to happen? So there's that kind of credibility of the skills development, because a fellowship has to develop you into becoming someone who's a kind of independent academic. The other thing which really commonly goes wrong, and I think this is true for every sort of grant application, is just not believing that you could actually get this done in a period of time. And that is something that we've all got a bit of a feel for as researchers have been around a bit. I think it's much less common that people just don't put enough in than putting far too much in to be achievable. So you need to really test the credibility of that with people who are more experienced and not necessarily in your field. So the panel members will give a score. If there's a big discrepancy, that are asked to discuss, but mostly there isn't. So it'd be rare for somebody to get an A from one panel member and a D from the other. I mean, I've not seen that happen. It's more the kind of B's and C's kind of type element. And when you have a discussion, it's a lot of it goes around the a lot of it will go around the kind of, is this a training experience for this person of a kind that looks like the sort of super duper track of doctoral training that NIHR wants to fund? And often that hasn't been thought through enough, and that's often what gets discussed. And then, so that's what happens before you get to interview. And then if you get to interview, it's really quite a staged and choreographed thing. And I think it's important to be really well prepared and do practice runs and actually really enjoy it. I haven't done an NIHR interview like that, but I did a fellowship interview of a similar kind about 6 weeks after my first child was born, and I kind of was so dazed. I walked into this big room full of people and kind of thought, oh, a bit late now. But there is but it's a very big room of people who are absolutely on your side. It's really lovely when somebody presents their work beautifully and you think, wow, we really want to fund this. And what should happen is that you've got more stuff that you want to fund than you can fund. And so if you get through to panel interview, then it means that you've got a really good proposal, and you've got to convince the panel that you can deliver it. And that panel is a really, really mixed panel. So it will be nursing, not surprisingly few nurses actually, given the composition of the applications and the and the various professions. So whether it be nursing, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, would be the kind of dominant disciplines. And then a few people like me, it would be unusual to get something like a neurologist, but public health people are often there, coming in from who might or might not meet that, who wouldn't have been eligible to go through that route. And then you have 2 PPI members of the panel who will always ask questions. So the way the questioning goes is that the 2 panel members who looked at your earlier application, looked earlier on and gave it the scores that got it through, they will be asked to, after you do a presentation of 5 minutes, and we can talk a bit about that in a minute, but they will ask you questions about the proposal, feasibility, scientific rigour, but they won't have very long. It's quite a short interview, something like 15-20 minutes. You have, I can't remember, this may well have changed since I last did it, but you have a sort of 5-minute presentation, about 5 slides. Then you get questions from the first panel member, then from the second panel member, and then it's goes to the PPI people, and it's opened out. And so you've got 2 PPI people, experts. Somebody like Gary would be, you know, who's got long experience and seen a wide variety of projects and got a good sense of what you can and can't do for a different sort of project. And you know, obviously what is sensible to try and do depends very much on the project. And they will always ask you questions. And you will at that point have had reviewer comments back from expert reviewers. So you will be expected to be on top of PPI questions and what your responses might be to reviewers. And then you need to really be able to defend your approach to PPI, but also to respond to reviewers, because one of the worst things to do in front of a panel is to be really defensive in relation to suggestions. So I can't think of a single panel I've been to which hasn't had some quite helpful suggestions that people could take forward. And if people just kind of, well, you know, I'm obviously not going to do that because, you know, you'd be surprised how often it happens. You can imagine the sort of people who do it, but it goes down very, very badly because everyone on the panel has given up a lot of time to do this and actually looking to bring their experience. And so it's sort of thinking, well, okay, I'll go away and think about this, and that's a really good thought. We hadn't considered it. We'll come back, because often those things will be picked up they will say, well, we fund you, conditional on, and they'll ask you to do some things, and that's often sort of improve the PPI plan. That may well be important. So the panel, so when you arrive for a panel, it's usually held in a hotel or something like that, and you'll have kind of probably come the night before, and you'll be sort of sat outside, and it just feels very, very formal and intimidating, and that actually isn't really the feel in the room. It's a very, very sort of positive vibe. So I think you kind of need to practice for that. And what I always do for people is whatever I'm rehearsing people for, it's like, okay, so like come along and see me, do the interview in my room, and then you leave them outside for ages and ages and ages, and they're really, really nervous. And then you go and you shake their hands, and if their hand is absolutely freezing, then that's absolutely the right state in which to do a practice interview, because you've kind of gone through that anxiety. And it's never ever as bad as your practice interview. That's my other tip. And then the presentation. Yeah. So most important, and I'm sure this has all been said this morning. The application as a whole, they're looking at 3 things: the applicant, the environment, and the project, and they are really pretty much equally important. Do we believe that this person will be well supported to kind of go on a really steep trajectory over the 3-year period by these people? And what they really dislike is a sense that actually Professor X, who is like paramedic king or queen or whatever, is actually using this person as a research assistant, and it's an application in disguise from them, and it's not really your thing. Because, I mean, of course, lots of PhDs are like that, but NIHR is looking to fund Rolls-Royce PhDs with loads and loads of extra development and conferences and all this kind of thing. So they're looking for people who are realistically have a prospect of an independent leadership role in research. So you've absolutely got to show that it is your own. And if it's your own, if it's not your own, that will show, because you've got to be on top of the literature that you've cited. You've got to be on top of why that's important. So that's owning it is really, really important. And I'd say, Wendy, that is probably the most important thing for those, because it is not unknown for people to say, oh, apply for this for my pet project, and I've not seen that be successful. Whereas I was actually Natalie's supervisor, and she was she was like telling me what's what, and that's absolutely as it should be. It's it's got to be it's got to be yours. The presentation, you have so little time. You want a small set of beautiful slides with not a lot on them. It's the usual thing. Medics are the worst, but I think most healthcare people are pretty dreadful. They'll write something on a slide and then say something slightly different, and you don't know whether you want to be listening to the person or looking at the slide. It's what everybody does wrong in slide shows all the way back. Basically, you want them to just see a few keywords and then look at you. You might have one data slide that you go through the detail of, but basically you don't want them to be thinking, do I listen to the candidate or do I look? And just practice it and script it, because as soon as you they will be very strict about time, and if you don't script it, you will inevitably burble a bit, and if you burble, you will run out of time and you will just lose that opportunity to finish with your final slide and final message. They'll cut you off. So just practice it. So those are kind of, that's my summary of the things I was asked. So I shall stop now. And any questions?
Thank you. We've had, there's one comment from Ellen. She said, could you comment on supervisors, mentors and choosing appropriately? Okay,
so I would say that a supervisor relationship is about as important as a marriage in terms of, how careful you should be about signing up. You want to have a supervisor who is close enough to the area to help you with set up your networks and all that kind of thing. It's definitely worth asking people about their experience of being supervised by that person and what it was like. And not only, are they okay, are they fair and unreasonable and so on, but are they, is their way of working one that you could work with? You need to just go and watch them give talks. Watch, if you can, sort of watch how they behave in public situations. I mean, some people are just so unsupportive. You really want to get a sense of that person. You need a senior supervisor who is credible to that team, who's been around long enough, knows their way around, that they will be a useful sort of networker and have the right level of support. I think another thing is but that might let's say you're an occupational therapist and that person has very much gone an occupational therapy route. They've done some great adaptations in rehabilitation, but they don't have a social science background of great depth. So you might then so making sure that you get the social science input that you need, particularly if you've got a professional first mentor, first supervisor, which you normally will for this fellowship. And then mentorship. I think that's become more important over the years. It's good to have somebody that you can just sort of take stuff to, who's in your profession and perhaps at a different institution, who can take a bit of a distant interest in your development. And if you have challenges in sort of, not so much relationships, but what's the right way forward within your supervisory team, it's good to have somewhere else that you can take that. And I think that sort of externality is seen to be helpful. You might want some sort of light touch advisory group, but not one that's going to just then sort of dominate your experience. But if your instincts are against someone as a supervisor, just listen to them. And if your instincts are very positive, just still be very careful. It's a long time, and it will be, and you'll be publishing with them in 5 years. So, it really matters.
Can I just add on the mentor? Can you hear me? Yeah. So just briefly, as I have looked at a lot of PCAF applications and the issue of mentors, and what I felt was frequently very important that this was a person who could really envisage, particularly when these joint clinical academic trajectories, who can be helpful on advising or supporting the applicant or the student then on negotiating these difficulties, because that's one of the most difficult things to manage, these conflicts between your clinical and your academic roles. And knowing Natalie, I mean, she's tough as nails on that, and not everybody is like that. And so it is something to partly learn, but also having the right support in managing this. That's sort of my personal perspective on that.
Yeah, and I think I think doing a PhD, particularly sort of, some people do PhD by publication, and I would say, actually, if you're a professional, often PhD by publication is a really good route through. So you don't have to get a fellowship into a conventional PhD, but if you do a conventional PhD with the kind of chapters and everything, it is, I think for most people, however well things go, it is quite an exhausting and often quite difficult experience. And there's this whole sort of literature around how the kind of, the culture is all wrong and we don't support people well enough, and people should have weekends off and stuff. But I think even at its best, it's really tough, and you've just got to build in supports, and you've got to have somebody who's going to be kind and supportive to you, really. I've been really, I say this because I've been really lucky with mentors, actually, and really lucky, and I've heard some horror stories, but actually I've heard stories where it's been really difficult and everybody's been really good, and I think that's why you need to be so careful.
We've had another comment on the a question. Thank you. Have you got anything you could add for people at the very beginning of their journey, i.e. considering an internship, especially mentors and finding some guidance early on?
And by an internship, we mean, do you have a...
I don't know. It's Julie Panzieri. Do you want to speak, Julie?
So I can respond sensibly. Can you unmute?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, just the NIHR internship as part of this scheme. I'm a bit confused about the different breakout rooms. Let me find the official names so I don't make things.
Sorry, I wasn't around earlier in the morning, so I just want to make sure I'm not missing out.
No, I just meant the, I'm going to mute myself and come back to you.
So, if you want, so shall I just, while you find that, I'll just, so generally at the very beginning, so I think talking to someone who's prepared to introduce you to other people, that is, what you need to do is to kind of work out, who are the, for example, and we were trying to work out recently, who are the kind of paramedic ambulance academics in the southeast, and so sort of look up the research arm of the, whether it's a university department, just look and see who's around, and go and see somebody whose career you rather admire. Go and see somebody and say, look, I'm really looking to develop myself as an academic, but I'm just at the beginning. Can you make me some introductions? Can you take me and see somebody? Can you? And the thing is, people really love being asked. And actually, it's really nice to be the person who found somebody who went on to really enjoy this. Really, so I went to. I had a consultant when I was a very junior doctor, and I said, I've seen this advert for these health services training fellowships. I've no idea how to apply for one, and she took me to see somebody who was really well placed to help me apply for it, and actually I got it. And so I think using networks and being prepared to go and see people, look up their work. I heard you go to conferences or just events. CRN has a lot of events for, you know, the specialty groups. Go to a talk, go and talk to people afterwards. Say, I'm interested, who can I talk to? And if you do that enough, you'll find enough of a range of people to. So I would just say that's the way to start. You can write to people out of the blue, and I try and respond to all of those, but it's really nice if it's just a kind of follow on from something that's happening. Is that helpful?
Ellen in the chat has said you could try NIHR advocates too. They cover a range of professions, and she's put a link there too. So thank you, Ellen, for that.
Thanks, Ellen.
Did you want to, Ellen? Did you want to talk about NIHR advocates? I don't know if I've heard of that. Is Ellen here?
Hello there.
Oh, hello.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie, for all your comments. Yes, they're not terribly widely known. I think NIHR are trying to push them a little bit. I was one for healthcare for a while. They were set up really, I guess, to support the ICA schemes, the clinical academic careers schemes. That's sort of where they originated from. And they were a group of enthusiasts who had had clinical academic careers, some of whom had had some of the NIHR awards, really to start spreading the word about the awards and to get people from underrepresented professions to consider them. I know you've mentioned paramedics, Jackie, and there are a number of other professions, non-doctors and dentists, who are very much underrepresented in getting these awards. So there's a lot of the professions you will see there are ones where we've been trying to encourage people to apply for these awards. So they're physiotherapists, occupational therapists, radiographers, there's healthcare scientists. So it's people of that ilk, really. And everybody is there, and they're very happy to be approached to give you some tips and guidance and maybe link you into other people who could help support you.
And don't hesitate to ask. So obviously what you need, you absolutely need people from your field, but actually it's just ask anybody. I mean, you know, if somebody comes up and says to me, oh, I'm a third year, you know, occupational therapy student, and I want to know. It's all, you know, it's really interesting, and I'll learn a lot in that conversation. So don't, you know, just ask everybody. There's this Mura of Spark novel, and she said, if you want a job, the thing to do is to tell everyone you're looking for a job. And if you just go everywhere and tell everyone you're interested, like, people will remember you as well. It's you know, just don't be shy. I say that as somebody who was.
Well, you're not now, are you? No, I agree with that. Just be brave. I mean, people have approached me, you know, completely out of field, nothing to do with physics at all, and you know, I'm really always really happy to talk to people because the principles are general. You know, you don't have to be. I might point them to someone for something specific, but you know, you can still support people, as Jackie says, regardless.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Jackie, we've got 35 seconds left. Is there anything you'd like to add, or shall we all?
Today's program, I've got, you know, what's my final tip? I would just build yourself a network right from the beginning, so that whatever comes up, you've got people you can ask.